is a many-splendored thing. Love lifts us up where we belong. All you need is love. These are, for some of you who may recognize, of course, song titles or lines from songs of the past. They're also the opening lines of a song in a movie called Moulin Rouge, called Elephant Love. And in this song, the male protagonist is trying to win the amorous affection of the female protagonist. And he's using love and all of its multiple facets as a guise for this ulterior motive. In Greek, we find there are 4 different words for love. So to some extent in English, we're limited because we use the word love when we mean different things. But in Greek, it's much more precise because we have these different words to give the different connotations of love. You have storge, love, which means sort of affectionate love, almost like the love that a dog has for his owner. We have philia, which is fraternal love, or brotherly or sisterly love, a camaraderie type of a love. Eros, which is probably what the male protagonist had in mind, is romantic love. However, this passage doesn't use any of those 3 words for love. Over and over again, as a matter of fact, in just those 14 verses, we have this same word for love used 29 times, or some form of it. And that word is agape. Agape, which means unconditional love. The kind of love that knows no bounds. The kind of love that God feels for us. We begin this passage with agapetos, which is the form of the word love that you use when you address somebody, as in beloved, or my love. It means much loved person. So you would call somebody that. This is the stream that is running through this entire passage, and it can be, if we allow it, a stream that runs through our lives, filling us and moving us along. God and love are not 2 realities. They are one. God's being and the being of love, and God's infinite power of being is the infinite power of love. God's being and the being of love are the same thing. 1 John 4:8 tells us whoever does not love does not know God, for God is love. And then in verse 21, the commandment we have from him is this: those who love God must also love their sisters and brothers. There's so much we can do with this passage. There's so much potential here as we unpack it and try to see the implications for our lives. There's no limit to where following this kind of powerful love can take us. There's a vibrant energy to living out this kind of love in our daily lives because it can reach out and touch other people. Not in a simple and limited way, like through affectionate love, storge, or fraternal love, philia, or even eros, romantic love. But instead, it can be unlimited, and it can be contagious, catching from one person to another, spreading around in a radically transformative way. We're changed when we encounter God. Everything doesn't remain the same. It isn't simply this act of receiving in which we experience God's love and then just go on our merry way. We're changed into new beings, and we respond and do something. We receive and experience God's love, which is that unconditional love, that agape love. And we take this agape love into the very deepest part of ourselves. And then we live it out and love our brothers and sisters also. Well, who are our brothers and sisters? I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that because it's very simple. That's everybody else. That's the others. Not myself, but the other people. It's not supposed to be my siblings, my blood relatives. It's not supposed to be my close friends. It's not going to be supposed to be the ones who I have a great deal in common with. Our brothers and sisters are all those with whom everybody. How silly it must seem to God when we sing a song of praise, or we say, I love you, Lord, and then we turn around and live in some way that doesn't show this kind of love to other people. These can be brothers and sisters who are nearby in this room, or they can be brothers and sisters who are far away, in the same room or across the world. When we proclaim how much we love God and then mistreat another person in any way, God must wonder what we really mean by love. It's certainly not agape love, and to be quite honest, it's not really even affectionate or fraternal love or romantic love. What about our brothers and sisters around the world? What about those ones that we can't see, the ones that we don't get to interact with? How do we live our lives in relation to them when we consider this call to love and to be loving and to live out this kind of love? Are we proclaiming our love for God and then not loving and caring about these sisters and brothers who we cannot see? These sisters and brothers who are around the world. We probably make some decisions that do show love. We probably make some decisions that do exhibit this kind of love at some point, and then at other points. Each one of us probably falls short of making those kinds of decisions. These 14 verses directly tell us to love one another 3 times. They say it explicitly, those words, love one another 3 times. But if we add in all those references to abide in God, and God is love, and it seems pretty clear. This kind of love knows no limits and transforms us into the Christ-like beings God would call us to be. That's what Paul's talking about when he references the new being in Christ. Last week, I talked about Sergeant York, that Tennessee sharpshooter, and his heroic acts of selflessness in World War I. But this week, I want to talk about another famous character, another one from World War I, that shows this kind of love as well. I want to talk about Elsa Brandstrom, who's also known as the Angel of Siberia. And her story is from World War I. She was the daughter of the Swedish ambassador to Russia and lived in absolute luxury. And at the beginning of the war, she was in the Swedish embassy looking out, and she saw the German prisoners being driven through the streets on their way to Siberia. She was in St. Petersburg. She was absolutely moved with compassion, just felt for these people. She saw them as fellow human beings. In some ways, she looked out and she saw their faces and didn't just see the horrible face of the enemy. She looked out and she saw a human being, beaten down, tired, exhausted, and being on a forced march. There she went on to go visit their prison camps. And when she got there, she saw unspeakable horrors. And here she was, this woman of high position, a woman who did not have to go out and engage. And in 1914 or 15, a woman would also give her some limitations. Recall in our country, women didn't even have the right to vote yet. But at 24 years old, this young lady began almost alone a fight of love against cruelty. And she prevailed. She began to fight against resistance and suspicion from the authorities. And she prevailed. She had to fight against the brutality and lawlessness of prison guards. And she prevailed. She had to fight against cold and dirt and hunger and illness, against the conditions of an underdeveloped country and a destructive war. And she prevailed. Love gave her wisdom and innocence, daring and foresight, and wherever she appeared, despair was conquered and sorrow was healed. She visited the hungry and gave them food. She saw the thirsty and gave them a drink. She welcomed the strangers, clothed the naked, and strengthened the sick. She became sick. She was imprisoned. But God was abiding in her. The irresistible power of love was with her. She continued her work after World War I ended, and she shifted her focus from, instead of prison camps, to all of those orphans left by the ravages of war. When the Nazis came to power, she had to flee from Germany, and she came to America. In America, she helped refugees. She worked with them as they arrived, and according to a friend of hers in New York, for 10 years, he personally watched her, these are his words, live out the creative genius of her love. Her friend, who happened to also be a theologian, writes, "She and I never had a theological conversation. It was unnecessary. She made God transparent in every moment. For God, who is love, was abiding in her, and she in him." From her life, we can take the message from these verses this morning. We can take as an example. We can take as a message to confess Jesus is the Christ so that God abides or remains in us and we in God. For God is love, and abiding in love means abiding in God. And when we put this love into action, it can lead to something incredible, like Elsa Bronstrom and what she became known as the Angel of Siberia. We can put our faith into action. There's no limit to what is possible. What is the power of love, of God's love? It's the power to move mountains. It's the power to overcome obstacles. It's the power to do more than we could possibly ever ask or imagine. The protagonist in Moulin Rouge was right, although he didn't understand it. Love is a many-splendored thing. Love lifts us up where we belong. All you need is love.